Good morning. How about that Il Trovatore? Um, I, of course, fell asleep before the end, and I actually had to stop making comments before the end because, and I'm not sure if you can see, this is actually a lot better. I have been washing my hands raw, essentially. The back of my hands had started bleeding yesterday, and I needed some intensive treatment. I just put a lot of CeraVe on it and put a sock over my hand. Anyway, and don't, well, supposedly an order of working hands and some special gloves are working their way towards my P.O. box, but we will see. Okay, tonight is going to be La Traviata, again by Verdi, so Il Trovatore, and I wanted to show you this from, and let's make it a little bigger, show you this from Wikipedia, and this has a list, this is the list of all the compositions by Verdi. We will see that three of his most played operas, actually I think they are the three most played operas by Verdi, Rigoletto, March 1851, Il Trovatore, January 1853, and La Traviata, March 1853. Okay? Yeah, of course, he has to finish the operas before, so that they can practice and yada yada, but they were not necessarily finished a hell of a lot of time before they were performed. In Il Trovatore, I didn't mention this, the original librettist, so the librettist is the person who writes the lyrics, so let's just call him the lyricist, died, and the libretto had to be reworked. So you can see that, and you can see Piave is someone who worked with Verdi on many operas and some of his most famous operas. So that's of interest as well. But we're going to be looking at La Traviata, and this is yet another opera where the heroine dies from tuberculosis. What can I say? It was not an unusual occurrence in the 19th century, especially in the urban artistic population. They were not known to be particularly well-to-do, well-fed, just healthy. Men and women both died from it, and you can see, so La Traviata was based on a play, La Dame aux Camélias, The Lady of the Camellias, also known in English, which was based on a novel, Camille. And a lot of derivative works have been made about this. And you could say La Boheme is also related, but not really. The person, the dame of the Lady of the Camellias, was a real person. Her name was Marie Duplessis, and she died, again, from tuberculosis when she was 23. And a note, of course, about the opera, yeah, of course, basically none of the singers you're ever going to see playing Violetta, who is La Traviata, the lost woman, is going to be 23 years old. It's Verdi. You're going to get a strong, and it's the Met. You might see, and I have seen, younger singers perform in operas like at Indiana University, and other music students, but of course they're not fully developed yet in their voice. They can have a nice voice, but even Pavarotti, he didn't come to the top of his form until he was pretty middle-aged and fat and yada yada. So the reason I bring this up is because the first performance, and let me see if they have it, they've got to have it here. The first performance of La Traviata was a fiasco. Now, Verdi had a lot of fiascos in his composing lifetime. Some of them deserved in that the opera sucked. So his first comic opera, which he wrote when he was young, I think it was called King for a Day, evidently was really, really horrible. And it was jeered. It was a fiasco. And the Italian opera audiences would not hold back if they did not like what you did. So with regards to La Traviata, opera audiences for a very long time have been used to, we want the beautiful voices and maybe some good acting, but the voice and the music is number one. we're willing to suspend our disbelief a little bit that whoever is playing Violetta is 20 years old, pretty, etc., and has all these men falling over her. Evidently, the first person to play Violetta was overweight, definitely very well fed, and not young, and not particularly pretty. And if, let me just see, oh yeah, she was 38. Um, so, and evidently the audience started laughing when she did her cough, uh, because to indicate she was going to be dying of tuberculosis, and that it was just a total rout by the end of the performance. Verdi got used to this, and he, you know, and the statement here is La Traviata last night, a fiasco. It says a failure, but it's a fiasco. Was the fault mine or the singer's? Time will tell. Well, it was the singer's. He had, during his lifetime, so unlike Bizet and Carmen, where he did not get to see his opera, well, he died 33 performances in, so Bizet didn't get to see how well received Carmen ultimately was. Verdi did get to produce La Traviata several times before he died. Let's see, this was from, I'm trying to remember, 1853, 1851, 1853. And Verdi died at the end of the century or the beginning of the 20th century, somewhere around then. So he had plenty of time to enjoy the success of La Traviata. It's a very famous one. Um, yeah, of course, always pay attention to the dying. And yes, she does seem to have quite a bit of breath for someone dying of tuberculosis. Isn't that the way with these TB operas? Um, but it starts out strong. You have the drinking song called Brindisi at the very beginning. And it starts with the party. Okay, Rigoletto also starts with a party. So I forgot to give you the shape of the story. The story is you have your main character is in love. Well, actually, several people are in love with Violetta. But Alfredo is in love with Violetta. He sings at her at the party. She kind of, they're going to go to Maxime's, but she kind of feels faint and coughs, and oh, we know she's doomed. Though Alfredo doesn't really know it. Violetta probably knows she has tuberculosis at this point. Um, so they love each other, yada yada, go off. His father, Alfredo's father, interferes because, for the sake of the family, because yeah, they keep saying she's a courtesan. She's not a whore per se, but she basically hangs around rich men and gets consideration. She gets paid in kind, I'm thinking jewelry and outfits, and maybe not a fee for service situation, but we will see. Um, and of course, it's not Alfredo himself. They actually go off and are living together, but it's not Alfredo himself that convinces her to go away. It's his father saying, for the good of Alfredo, could you please go away? And she does. And of course, she's dying of TB, and he comes back, and she dies in his arms and whatnot. Mm, You know, um, to me, these are not compelling stories. It's beautiful music, though. That's why I listen to them, not for the plot. There are ones that I enjoy the plot, but those tend to be the comedic ones. Um, these tragic operas, especially at a time like now, I'm more for comedy. I sleep to Mystery Science Theater 3000 to give you an idea. My preference, I watch the IT Crowd and the Mighty Boosh, one of the two every day. You can find them online for free if you know where to look. In any case, this is La Traviata. Again, beautiful music. One of the things to note, this was a transitional period, as I mentioned, Rigoletto, Il Trovatore, and La Traviata, right back to back to back. And his most famous, most played operas. Kind of his most accessible operas, Verdi's. One thing to note, and you'll see this in La Traviata, and it was partly in Il Trovatore, but that one, it's the layers of music. So in Il Trovatore, you had the Miserere, where you had Leonora up front, and she's singing her heart out. Then off stage, you have a chorus of monks doing the Miserere, and then you hear far in the distance Manrico singing his troubadour song. Okay, there are three different musical strands, and they're layering over top of each other, and they create a certain kind of mood. Mainly, the moods in the troubadour song are, I'm sorry, the monks in the troubadour songs are, we have this religious, and then we have this very secular song, and then we have Leonora, oh my heart, up front. In La Traviata, we start out with this party scene, and we have this in Rigoletto as well, where you will hear different strands of music, like there is a party and there's different pieces of music coming from different rooms, and it all flows together. There's really no pause. Again, we haven't seen one of these old time operas yet where you have a well defined song, aria that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And Verdi still has many of these in here. And then there's dialogue. Now, it's not spoken usually, it's sung, but it's this recitative, and it's almost like chanting in a church. It's a lot faster than your aria singing and duets and choruses and that kind of thing. But that's so that you can have some dialogue back and forth. Well, this is the time when Verdi was figuring out and working with the librettist of how can I reduce the amount of dialogue and then have it flow with the music rather than have this, harpsichord. They didn't have the harpsichord, but piano accompanied dialogue essentially, because it would be like I'm talking like this, and this is not a very interesting song. I'm all on one note. That's kind of the chanting thing. Recitative is not that bad, but it's a lot of it is kind of like that. It's trying to be more like natural language, and singing is absolutely not like natural language. In any case, I hope you've been enjoying the operas. Let me just go back to the Met Opera. Up until 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time, you can watch Il Trovatore, because it's just the recording, and maybe there's not as much demand. You can probably try to, eyeball where in the video the Anvil chorus and the Miserere in particular are. Again, those are my favorite parts. The Anvil chorus everybody loves. And as I was commenting last night, the Met Opera has a lot of money, so they can afford to, pay for some well-built men to swing those hammers. I've seen some very pathetic Anvil choruses where they're just using their regular opera chorus guys, and those guys tend not to be very muscular or young. Anyway, so